All right, the saddle to narrow squat transition. This is a super potent mobility tool. It can be really difficult, so just keep that in mind. Everyone is allowed to play with this, but just recognize that it's pretty tough. So don't get discouraged if you're realizing you have certain limitations that are holding you back from completing the movement in its entirety. And you'll even see as I go through it, I very much have my own limitations that hold me back in various areas. It's just really important to recognize what those limitations are, what your end ranges are, so you can ultimately push on them in the most meaningful way. So with that, we're coming to our saddle position, which is tops of the feet on the floor. And from there, I'm going to push my hips into my heels. All right, now to complete a full range of motion saddle, or whatever your full range of motion is, you're going to lean back as far as you can. All right, so this is about my end range. From here, I'm going to come up. Now I'm going to shift my weight forward and bring my hips up so I have room to put my toes on the floor. Now, as we're moving through this, we'll have a little bit more momentum, but from there, we're going to get into our squat, right? So I'm going to push up, toes make contact with the floor, and I'm going to use that momentum to shift into my heels. Now, you'll notice I have ankle dorsiflexion limitations, all right? So my heels don't quite make contact with the floor in the very bottom of my narrow squat. That's okay. I'm going to still stand from that position. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, somebody told me if I'm, on the tips of my toes, I can't squat, that's going to be dangerous. This is an unweighted position. If you're finding that that's uncomfortable because of your own limitations, it's not the movement that's doing it. It's your limitations. It's a prior injury. It's a lack of exposure, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So don't be so nervous. Your body can do a lot of really cool and interesting things. But recognize, again, if you have a limitation there, just pull the plug a little bit before you stand all the way up, right? Put your hands on the floor for balance. All those things are fair game. It's up to you to play and experiment to figure out how you can approach this in the most optimal way. Obviously, from there, we are going to squat back down. And so remember, my heels have to come off a little bit so they peel. And then this is a really tough part of the movement, is bringing your knees to the floor with control. Now, set something up that can receive some of the impact. It's going to be funky if you slam your knees on the hard floor. Because you might not be able to get there with full control. So you'll see, right, it's basically a double knee touch, right? You're extending, 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 but because we're going to finish the pose, we're not coming right back to this narrow squat. It's okay if it's not the smoothest thing ever. You're trying your best to keep it smooth, but if they kind of plop on the floor, that's okay. From here, again, bring the hips up, and now we transition back to our saddle, right? Now, you can again use your hands as a little bit of support, but the idea would be to get to a place where you don't have to use the hands. You can transition comfortably without them, back and forth. Again, you can see in my reps that I need to work through certain limitations. It doesn't mean you can't go for it or you can't experiment. Just recognize what they are so you can focus on them as they come up and work through them in a meaningful way. So anyways, that is the saddle to narrow squat transition. I hope you have fun with this, and I hope you have fun implementing it in your physical practice.